I'm a 34-year-old woman, a public school teacher living in a quiet suburb. I bought my first home when I was 27. It wasn't fancy, just a basic 3-bedroom with old carpet, peeling paint, and a cracked driveway. But I loved it because it was mine. I worked summer school, took on after-school tutoring, and even picked up weekend jobs for years to save up for it. When the time came, I paid for everything myself. Every inch of this place, from the walls I painted to the floors I sanded, has my work in it. When I told my parents I was buying the house, they offered to help with the down payment. I thanked them but said no. I knew what their help meant: control, conditions, and constant opinions disguised as generosity. They didn't argue out loud, but the cold looks and guilt trips started immediately. For years after, they kept throwing comments like we only wanted to support our daughter, or it's a shame when pride gets in the way of family. That's how they are. Appearances matter to them more than anything. Growing up, emotions had to be managed in silence, and family loyalty was just another word for obedience. If you didn't follow the plan they had for you, then you were disrespecting the people who raised you. It's not that they're evil people, just the kind that views love as a transaction. 4 years ago, when I was 30, I became a licensed foster parent. That was something else they never understood. They said it was too much responsibility for someone single and warned me not to get too attached. Then Maya came into my life. She was 15 back then, quiet, withdrawn, and used to being shuffled around. Her previous placements were chaotic. She came with one duffel bag, a pile of school absences, and zero trust in adults. We didn't bond overnight. It took months of steady routines, small steps, and proving I wasn't going to leave. But eventually, we settled into something real. I started looking forward to cooking dinner for two, watching old movies on the couch, and hearing her rant about whatever was going on at school. She had her own room, decorated exactly how she wanted. She brought color and life into a house that had only known silence before her. I never formally adopted her, but she became my daughter in every real way. My parents met her a few times. They were never openly rude, but I could feel the tension. They asked weird questions about her background, made passive comments about temporary guests, and never invited her to any family events. Behind my back, they'd refer to her as a project or ask when I planned to return to normal. Maya turned 18 last year. She aged out of the foster system, but I told her she could stay here as long as she needed. She had just started community college nearby, and I wanted her to have stability without worrying about rent or moving again. That's when my parents started circling back, this time with talk about legacy planning. They brought it up casually at first. Something about how I should prepare for the future by putting the house in their name to streamline inheritance. I shut it down immediately. The house was mine. I paid for it. I renovated it. I wasn't giving anyone else a say in it, especially not people who never helped build it. They didn't let it go. The next time we spoke, they said it wasn't safe for me to be making legal decisions influenced by someone with no blood connection. They claimed I was putting their future at risk by not protecting family assets. According to them, Maya shouldn't be living in a property that would eventually become family inheritance. That's when I realized how deep their entitlement ran. In their minds, the house wasn't really mine. It was a placeholder until they could convince me to hand it over. I told them, flat out, that Maya was my family. They had no say in my home, my decisions, or who lived here. They tried to guilt me, calling it a betrayal, saying I was choosing a stranger over the people who raised me. I reminded them that I bought this house alone, maintained it alone, and that no one else had ever put $1 into it. That was the last real conversation we had. After that, they started distancing themselves. No more calls, no invitations, no check-ins. But before going silent, they made one thing very clear. They didn't consider Maya part of anything that should be passed down. It wasn't even about money at that point. It was about their belief that family is only defined by blood, obedience, and legacy. Anything outside that box doesn't count to them. I didn't chase them. I didn't try to explain anything again. Instead, I focused on what mattered, keeping Maya safe, helping her finish school, and making sure she knew this place would always be hers too, no matter what. That's when I started thinking about what would happen if I wasn't around, how I could make sure no one could ever take this from her. That's when everything started to shift. It started a few weeks after I cut off contact with my parents. Maya had the day off from school and was home alone. I was at work grading papers when my phone started ringing nonstop. I checked my screen and saw 6 missed calls, all from Maya. When I finally picked up, her voice was shaky. She told me my mother had shown up at the house, uninvited, and was knocking on the door asking questions about who she was and what right she had to be there. She wasn't yelling, but the things she was saying were sharp and mean. Maya didn't open the door. She stood a few feet away, phone in hand, recording everything. My mom stayed on the porch for several minutes talking loudly about how this house was never meant for strangers, and how she had the right to check on her daughter's property. Then she left. I dropped everything and drove home. When I got there, Maya was sitting in the kitchen, visibly shaken. She handed me her phone and I watched the video. It wasn't violent, but it was ugly. My mom was calm, deliberate, and clearly there to scare her. That's when I called my parents and demanded to know what they thought they were doing. They didn't act surprised. My mom claimed she was just checking in since she hadn't heard from me. My dad joined the call halfway through and accused Maya of manipulating me for housing. They both acted like it was their right to involve themselves in my life and in my home, because family doesn't let outsiders take over what belongs to them. I reminded them, again, that they never paid a single dollar for this house. I paid for everything: the down payment, the repairs, the taxes. I handled it all, and they had no legal or moral claim to it. My dad said something about how I was being emotionally exploited, and how one day I'd regret turning my back on family. Then he hung up. After that call, Maya sat me down and told me she didn't want to come between me and my parents. She said she could start looking for a room to rent near campus. I stopped her right there. I told her this was her home too, and no one was going to push her out. Not now, not ever. That same night, I went online and ordered new locks for all the doors. I also bought a set of outdoor security cameras and set them up that weekend. I called my lawyer and told him what happened. He advised I make it crystal clear, legally, that no one else had a claim on the house, and that Maya had every right to live there. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from a lawyer representing my parents. Inside was a formal letter claiming the house had been a family gift and that I owed my parents restitution. It was filled with vague references to verbal promises and emotional commitments. I forwarded it to my real estate attorney, who responded immediately. He shut it down fast. There was no written agreement, no record of payment from my parents, no signature, no deed transfer, nothing. They had no leg to stand on. But he warned me, if they were willing to get lawyers involved, it might be time to think ahead. He suggested setting up a living trust to protect the property and name a beneficiary. That night, I sat down with Maya. We didn't talk about the drama or my parents. I asked her where she saw herself in 5 years. She looked confused at first, like I was preparing her for something, but I told her I wasn't trying to send her away. I wanted her to dream bigger, to start thinking about the kind of life she wanted to build. Then I asked her if she would ever want this house to be hers, not as a kind gesture, not just emotionally, actually hers in writing, in the law, in the future. She got quiet. Her eyes watered. She asked if I was serious. I told her I was. We didn't make any decisions that night, but the next morning we talked again. She said she didn't know if she was ready, but she was honored. We agreed to start the process slowly, first by setting up a trust with her as the sole beneficiary, and then revisiting co-ownership if she decided to stay long-term. That was the first time we talked about the future without fear. We weren't just surviving together anymore. We were building something. The paperwork started the next week. My lawyer began drafting documents to protect the property from any future claims. Maya's name wouldn't be on the deed just yet, but the trust would make sure everything passed directly to her without any court process if something ever happened to me. Until then, I remained the sole legal owner. From that point forward, things changed. Maya stopped talking about moving out. She started talking about painting her room a new color, about planting flowers in the front yard, about maybe adopting a cat next semester. There was a shift in the air. The house didn't just feel like mine anymore. It felt like ours. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that from us. The first thing I did was update my will. I sat down with my lawyer and made it official the house would go to Maya, no probate, no middlemen, no loopholes. Everything would pass directly to her. I didn't tell anyone in my family. I knew it would start another fire, and I wasn't interested in explaining myself anymore. But somehow they found out. It started with a cousin, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, suddenly reaching out. She sent a long message asking if it was true I was cutting out my own blood to give everything to someone I didn't even give birth to. I didn't argue. I just told her Maya was my family, and that was enough. The next thing was an invite. One of my aunts was hosting a family dinner and said it would mean a lot if I came. No reason, just to catch up. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them at a neutral location, hoping it might just be a normal meal. As soon as I walked into the dining room, I knew what it really was. The seating arrangement, the quiet looks, the way the conversation kept circling back to legacy and family unity. Someone even brought up how important it is to think carefully before making permanent legal decisions. I didn't even sit down. I told them I wasn't interested in a lecture disguised as a meal and left. That was the last time I walked into a room expecting family and finding a strategy meeting. A few days later, Maya pulled me aside after class. She said someone had called her school, pretending to be a concerned relative. The caller said she was living in unsafe conditions and suggested someone from the school check on her. Luckily, the staff didn't buy it. They verified her status, found nothing wrong, and flagged the call as suspicious. When Maya told me, I asked her to request the records from the school. Sure enough, the number traced back to a landline that matched my parents' address. I contacted the school myself and shared the full backstory. They issued a formal notice. Neither of my parents were allowed to call, email, visit, or contact Maya in any form. Any future attempts would be escalated immediately. That was it for me. I blocked both of my parents' numbers. I removed them from my email. I locked down my social media. Then I called my lawyer again and told him to make the no contact terms part of the property trust. We rewrote the documents. If either of them tried to challenge anything again, they'd hit a legal wall before they even got started. We also finalized the trust language. If something happened to me, everything would go to Maya, not just the house, but any insurance, savings, and retirement accounts. I added one more clause. If I ever became medically incapacitated, she'd be the one in charge of the house and all decisions about it. Not long after, I got one last call. It came from a random number. I picked up without thinking and heard my father's voice. He didn't yell or argue. He just asked if I really meant to do this. He sounded tired, not angry, just worn down. He talked for a few minutes. I listened. When he finished, I hung up. I blocked the number. That was the last time I heard either of them speak to me directly. A few nights later, Maya and I were sitting on the porch. The air was warm. She was drinking tea, and I was flipping through a notebook with renovation ideas. We started talking about the kitchen. It hadn't been updated since the 90s, and she said she wanted to learn how to tile a backsplash. We decided we'd start in spring. No drama. No lectures. Just a regular conversation about a regular project. That porch used to be where I stood and braced myself when my parents pulled up. Now it's where we plan things. The next morning, she texted me a link to a video about budget kitchen makeovers. Later that day, she picked up a sketch pad and started drawing layout ideas. We weren't talking about escaping anymore. We were building. No one was watching us. No one was waiting to pounce. No one could take it from us. The silence didn't feel empty. It finally felt like peace. A few months after things went quiet, a distant uncle passed away. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but apparently he left behind a small inheritance to be divided among several relatives. The memorial service was scheduled for the following weekend. My parents assumed I'd show up. They even had a spot saved for me in the front row. I didn't go. Not because I didn't care that someone died, but because I knew it wasn't going to be a normal memorial. It would be another staged event to corner me, shame me, and try to pull me back into their version of family unity. I wasn't going to be used as a prop again. After the service, my phone lit up. Texts came in from 2 cousins and an uncle. None of them mentioned the funeral directly. They just accused me of disrespecting family tradition and said I should be careful about burning bridges you might need later. I didn't reply. That same week, word started spreading that I'd placed my house in a trust, with Maya as the beneficiary. I hadn't told anyone except my lawyer and Maya, but someone must have overheard or dug around, because news in my family travels fast, especially when it's something they think they can spin into drama. One aunt, who had always been more on the quiet and reasonable side, reached out. She asked to meet for coffee. We sat outside a little cafe near my school. She didn't push or lecture. She just asked if it was true that I planned to leave the house entirely to Maya. I told her yes, because Maya had earned it. Not by blood, but by everything we'd built together from the moment she walked through my front door. My aunt sat quietly for a few moments, then said she hoped one day my parents realized what they had thrown away. Before we left, she warned me, apparently my parents had started speaking with a lawyer again, this time trying to build a case around something they called a verbal agreement. They were telling people I had once promised them the house would go to them, as part of a future estate plan. I didn't panic. Months earlier, I'd worked with my lawyer to gather every email, every payment receipt, and every single legal document tied to the house. There was no verbal agreement. There was no written agreement. There was nothing. Meanwhile, Maya overheard something at school. A few students in her art class were talking about a woman who cut off her parents over some foster kid. They didn't say names, but one mentioned the name of my street. Maya didn't say anything at first. She just got quiet for a few days. I reached out to the school again. They confirmed that someone had contacted them, not my parents directly this time, but an alumni who claimed to have concerns about a student's home life. It was an obvious workaround. I submitted documentation about the previous contact bans, and the school responded fast. They issued a new order banning all third-party inquiries related to Maya's file if not directly from her or me. Even with the school stepping in, the situation took a toll on Maya. She started pulling back. Her room stayed clean, too clean. No sketchbooks lying around. No coffee mugs left on her nightstand. One night I came home and saw her bags open. Her art supplies were half packed. She said she didn't want to be the reason I lost everyone I grew up with, even though I told her I had already lost them long before she came into my life. I didn't argue. I didn't go into a speech. I just sat down on the floor next to her and said that whatever I'd lost, I would have lost anyway. That what she brought into my life mattered more than what anyone took out of it. She didn't answer. She just looked at me, then slowly started unpacking the bag. And just like that, we kept going. That spring, I started converting the basement into a studio apartment. It had always been just storage and an old laundry room, but I decided to turn it into something livable. It could be for Maya if she stayed after graduation, or it could be rented out as an extra income stream. I hired a contractor to handle the plumbing and electrical, but everything else, painting, floors, shelves, I handled on my own weekends. Word spread fast through the neighborhood. One neighbor asked if I was expanding for the family. Another asked if it was an in-law suite. I didn't answer either of them. A week later, I heard from a distant cousin. Then another. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions on what I was doing with our house. I hadn't realized how much gossip could come from a few delivery trucks and bags of concrete. Then one afternoon, while the workers were on lunch break and I was upstairs, someone managed to walk into the house through the one back door the contractor had temporarily left unlocked. It was one of my cousins, someone I hadn't seen in years. No text, no call, just drove up and let herself in. She was already halfway down the stairs to the basement, walking through the space like she owned it. I asked what she was doing there. She looked surprised, then casually said she assumed the family still had access. She was just curious about the changes. I told her to leave, and she did, but not before making it clear she didn't see anything wrong with showing up like that. After she left, Maya told me she didn't feel safe anymore. I couldn't blame her. I realized this wasn't just about awkward visits or family tension. This was about people who truly didn't believe boundaries applied to them, and who didn't see Maya as part of this house at all. That night, I added more security cameras. I had a privacy fence installed around the yard and reinforced all the exterior doors. My lawyer filed a formal trespassing notice against the cousin who came in. It wasn't aggressive. It was just a clear line. No more unannounced drop-ins, no more assumptions, no more gray areas. Oddly enough, that incident gave Maya some clarity. She'd always tried to give people the benefit of the doubt, but now she saw it for what it was. These people didn't just resent her, they erased her. That made the next piece of news even more important. She got accepted into a university out of state. She hesitated before telling me. She thought leaving might feel like abandoning the life we built. I told her she wasn't leaving, she was growing. That house wasn't a weight holding her back. It was a launch pad. We sat down and went over the trust again. I added a clause. If anything happened to me before she turned 30, the house would be hers outright. And if she came back after school, she'd become co-owner in writing. That same week, I got another letter. New attorney. Same last name. This one came from my parents' new legal rep. A formal request for mediation over the disputed property. No surprise there. They were still trying to spin a false narrative about ownership, hoping I'd give in. I passed the letter to my lawyer. He reviewed everything and said they had nothing. Still, we agreed to one session of mediation, though my lawyer warned it would likely be symbolic more than substantive. Not to patch things up, but to end it legally. No more letters. No more contact. Just closure. Maya didn't want to be involved, and I didn't want her to be either. She'd been dragged through enough already. The day before she left for college, she stood in the doorway with her bag slung over her shoulder and looked back at the living room. She didn't cry or make a speech. She just smiled and said, "Take care of our house." She walked out the front door like she owned the whole world. And I knew she wasn't just leaving. She was reclaiming everything that was ever denied to her. The mediation took place in a cold, beige conference room in a downtown office building. One long table, 2 lawyers, 3 silent water pitchers. My parents sat on one side with their attorney. I sat on the other with mine. The room was quiet except for the sound of papers shuffling and chairs creaking. No greetings. No eye contact. Just waiting for it to begin. Their lawyer started off with a folder full of printed emails. Most of them were years old, messages where I'd mentioned home repairs or family visits, things they were now trying to twist into evidence of some kind of verbal agreement. He brought up phrases like legacy and intent, saying it was clear that the house had been talked about as a shared family asset. My lawyer didn't even flinch. He pulled out our own stack of records, the title, the mortgage history, the deed, the trust documents. There was no written agreement, no transfer, no financial contribution from anyone but me. Everything was signed, dated, and filed. Legally, the house had always been mine, and emotionally, it hadn't belonged to them in years. Then the mediator asked the key question, what exactly were my parents hoping to get out of this, and whether there was any legal basis for such a request? Their answer was simple. They wanted either partial ownership of the house or a buyout based on its current market value. I said no. I didn't explain. I didn't try to soften it. Just no. My mother gave a speech. She talked about betrayal. She talked about how hard they worked to raise me. She called Maya a stranger and said it was sad that someone outside the bloodline was being handed something that was supposed to stay in the family. It went on for a few minutes. Nobody interrupted. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to argue with someone who believed love was something to be traded for property. My father didn't say a word. Not the whole time. He just stared down at the table with a look that made it clear he believed he was owed something, not by law, but by legacy. Like the house itself had somehow betrayed him by not falling into his hands. As the meeting came to a close, I made one offer. Not because I had to. Not because I felt guilty. I just wanted it done. I told them I'd agree to a one-time payment of $5,000 in exchange for them dropping any and all claims now and in the future. A legal closure. No more letters. No more lawyers. No more noise. They refused. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. He walked out without a word, unwilling to acknowledge that their entire claim had no legal foundation. My mother didn't follow right away. She stayed behind, just standing there like she was waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. She left a minute later. 3 days passed. Then a letter arrived in the mail. A formal notice from their estate attorney. They'd updated their will. I had been removed entirely. No mention, no clause, no explanation. Just gone. I didn't even finish reading it. I shredded it and recycled the pieces. There was no anger, no sadness, just finality. That chapter didn't end with some big dramatic fight. It didn't end with anyone changing their mind. It ended quietly, with no one left trying to fix anything that was already broken. And the silence that followed? It didn't weigh me down this time. It just meant it was finally over. 2 months after mediation, everything was finalized. The trust became legally airtight, no loopholes, no contests, no future claims. The paperwork was signed, stamped, and recorded. Maya's name was officially added to the deed, not as a placeholder or a backup, but as co-owner. The house belonged to both of us now. We didn't celebrate with anything big, just takeout on the porch, burgers, fries, and the kind of silence that feels earned. Nothing loud, nothing showy, just the quiet knowing that no one could take this from us anymore. Before she left for university, Maya gave me a framed photo. It was one we took the day she moved in, standing in front of the house, both of us looking like we had no idea what was coming. On the back, she wrote, "You gave me a place to become myself." She left 2 days later, and within a week, she was sending photos from campus. A library window view, a late-night ramen run, her new art studio class. She got a part-time job at the campus bookstore and joined a small study group. Her calls weren't about stress or survival anymore. They were filled with little wins, new people, new routines, real peace. I visited during fall break. When I saw her waiting by the dorm entrance, I barely recognized the girl I had met 4 years earlier. Her posture had changed. Her eyes didn't scan the room like she was preparing for something to go wrong. She looked settled. Back home, the silence stayed, but it wasn't the kind that presses on your chest. It was peaceful. The house finally felt like a home. No knocks, no unexpected calls, no one trying to insert themselves where they didn't belong. The court orders held. My parents never contacted me again. No emails, no back-channel messages through extended family. Just complete silence. The cousin who had trespassed once posted a vague status online, something about greedy people forgetting where they came from. It didn't go anywhere. Nobody commented. No one shared it. It vanished like a rock tossed into a pond with no ripples. Later that winter, a letter came from an old family friend. No apology, no excuse, just a simple handwritten note saying they'd been watching from the sidelines, and they understood things differently now. I didn't reply, but I kept the letter. That spring, a box showed up on my porch. No return address. Inside were childhood photos, a couple of books from my old room, and a sweater I hadn't seen in years. No note, no explanation, just things packed in silence. I kept the photos. I donated the rest. Not because of anger, just because I had no space left for anything that didn't come with care. The house didn't feel different because of paint or new furniture. It felt different because it was finally full of only the people who belonged in it. And every few days, Maya sends another message. A picture of a classroom, or a new meal she cooked. She ends them all the same way, "See you at our house." And I know she means it, because now it really is.